Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and I am back with another video. Today we're going to be using Christmas toys and Color Me Trees. These are both new stamp sets from Simon Says Stamps. This is from the Believe in the Season release. And in typical form, it's going to appear to look like a one-layer card, but I actually did pop up some things. I know. Different for me, but I kind of wanted just something a little bit different. I know we all feel like we get stuck in ruts. There is going to be some masking just because some of the things are flat and some of them are popped up. So using full stick post-it notes as my masks, and then I really loved this tree, but I didn't want such the bold black design. I wanted it to be more simple. So I'm stamping it in evergreen. I didn't think I was going to have to mask to begin with, and then I realized it was going to get on my wagon and I was going to need to mask it, so I had to make do with what was already laying on my desk because I'm lazy and my desk is messy. So I'm stamping that in the evergreen. These Simon's Says Stamp inks work well with Copics. And just to give everything some continuity, I'm going to go ahead and use a Copic Safe journaling pen to outline that tree so that it does have a black outline just like everything else does. We're going to get into the Copic coloring pretty quickly here because there is a lot of it. There's a lot of little things that need to be colored. So for my tree, I wanted it to have some dimension, and I know you're probably thinking that it looks a little crazy right now with light green over the darker green, but by the time we're done, the pattern will be really, really subtle. So in order to give it some dimension, I am putting the shading where the pine needles would lay over each other. So at the point where it's the most narrow would be the darkest. I wasn't too particular about paying attention to coloring over the ornaments on it because I intended to go back with my colorless blender and just kind of clean them out. But I was careful with my darkest color because those are obviously the hardest to remove. So I'm using a flicking motion. I'm not putting down a solid line. Everything is really kind of streaky because that's how pine needles look. So I wasn't trying to get solid color here. And I ended up, I go over everything twice, so I wasn't really worried about it. This is just the first layer. And you can see some of that pattern in the background is already starting to disappear where it's at the darkest point. I just thought it would be, I wanted a tree. I really wanted a tree for this card. And this one was the best one in that stamp set for the size. But it also was the one that had the pattern on it. So just making it a little more subtle allowed me to use a stamp set that I already owned and still make it work for the card that I wanted to. This is my go-to red combination. I went ahead and colored the bulbs. There's so much coloring on here. I kind of had to decide what was going to stay and what was going to go. So the bulbs were just really simple coloring. I tried to keep everything else that was maybe a little bit more complex or maybe you'd have more questions about. For her dress, I didn't want it to be flat. I wanted it to have some dimension. So see those little triangles at the bottom of her dress? This is where they would lay down on her legs. So they're the valleys. Your valleys are always darker, and then your highlights are on your peaks. So as I'm coloring, I'm moving from lightest out to my darkest color and darkest back into my lightest. I'm very careful when I color to leave a lot of white. And the reason that is because I want to make sure that at the end I still have that highlight. So I'm just going out, I'm adding just little flicks of color into those valleys. And especially with the darkest color, I'm adding just very little. Underneath her dress, like the way that it's drawn, there is an actual underneath of her dress. That would be darker. There would be shadows under there. And I have a tendency to color pretty much everything as if my light source was in the top right. So the left-hand side of her dress will be darker. The second time that I go back through, I start bringing out that color, filling in those white spaces, just because now I have a foundation laid and I'm much more comfortable doing it. But you do it however you want to do it. I mean, if you can conserve your highlight without leaving such huge white areas in the beginning, then that's fine. That's just what works for me. So you can see her dress looks like there are some peaks and valleys there, and it's just a couple of simple triangles. So if you haven't tried that before, maybe give it a try. For the wagon, I wanted it to look multi-dimensional. So again, the light source is on the right-hand side, so the shadows are going to be on the left-hand side, but a tire sticks out from the, for lack of a better word, the rim. So it's also going to be darker where it's closest to the tire on the right-hand side. That area will be darker because the tire sticks out past it and casts the shadow. So there would be a highlight on the left-hand side where it's closest to the center, and then there would be a highlight on the right-hand side where it's closest to the center. So you want to just keep those areas in mind, and you'll see once we're done coloring, which will just be 1 second here, that they really do start to look dimensional, and it will look even more so once we put the black on the tires. I'm coloring my little doll, my little girly there, and she didn't have a ton to color on her. Her little legs are pretty tiny, and then so the way she would be colored is, again, the left-hand side would be darker. Underneath her dress, where her shoes are, that would all be darker. And then where her hair kind of hangs over her face on the right-hand side would be just a little bit darker from her bangs, not a ton. The arm on the right-hand side, the shadow would be on the underneath of it. And all of this is just using the very tip of my marker and a super light touch. A lot of times when I'm showing people how to approach it with a lighter hand, I tell them to hold the marker straight up. If you hold the marker straight up, then really only the tip of your marker can touch the page. And it's a little uncomfortable, but until you get comfortable coloring it or holding the pen how you normally would, that's an easy way to just kind of get a very light touch. I kept my color palette super simple. I used all of the same reds, all of the same browns, all of the same greens, just so everything kind of matched. For my little girl's hair here, I decided to make her kind of a like a dirty blonde, and that means I went heavy on the light colors and really light on the dark colors. So I don't know if you've seen any of my other videos. I talk a lot about how you don't have to own every marker. You can kind of work with what you've got to get the look you're going for. And since I wanted her to be more blonde, I was very, very light-handed with the darker colors. And it's completely different. And you'll see with the bear, because with the bear, I wanted him to be darker. And so I put down more of the dark. And even though they're the same colors, they look completely different, which I love because it means you don't have to buy 556 million Copics. So for her hair, I did add more of the, my darkest color was E59. I added more of that to the left-hand side than I did to the right. And then as I'm shading from the part of her hair down and where her ponytail is gathered up, leaving a highlight in the center. For the bear, I have a really hard time doing this. I always just want to color everything. I want to color all of the things. So I ended up coloring his arm, even though I didn't need to, because I was going to pop it up over the wagon. With the bear, I wanted just a ton of texture, so I'm using just small flicking motions to kind of get little bear fur in there, and I'm being more light-handed on the right-hand side, so I'm not putting down as many marks. Now you'll see I'm coloring this arm and I'm coloring it incorrectly. Even if I was going to color him, I'm still doing it incorrectly because I wanted his arm to be on top, which means the shadows would be on his belly. The shadows wouldn't be on his arm. So everybody makes mistakes. I don't think if I would have pointed it out, anybody would have noticed. But I'm just telling you, so when you guys are watching it, if you're trying to color your own bear, you're like, wait a minute, what is she? What's going on there? Yeah, I did it wrong. So it's totally, it's okay. We're gonna fix it later with that little arm that's popped up. When I took high school art classes, I learned a lot of different techniques for adding shading, and one of them is called stippling. And stippling is adding a bunch of dots to something to shade it. So if you want it darker, you add more dots. If you want it lighter, you add less dots. This form of coloring for texture for the fur really is not too much different. But I'm using colors, but there's going to be more flicks where you want it darker and less flicks where you want it lighter. So just try to keep that in mind as you're coloring. And again, since that the light source is in that upper right-hand side, then that's where it's going to be the lightest, where the light would hit him. And if I had tucked his arm behind the wagon, this would have been totally fine. But since I didn't, it's colored wrong. We're going to use a ton of grays, for the wagon to do the wheels, and then also like the rim of the wagon and the handle. I'm just going to show you the tires though, because everything else is just super simple coloring, nothing that I felt like you needed to see. For the wheels, I'm coloring the entire thing in with a, I think I used a C3. Yes, I used a C3. And yes, I'm trying to color it black, but we're going to do it with the grays because it gives you more dimension. It gives you so much more dimension than just coloring it flat black. So again, the shadows are going to be on the left-hand side because that tire sticks out. There's going to be some shadows also on the right-hand side. And you're going to see as we start to build this, I mean, even if I just left it like this, just stop right now. Like you can totally see how it gives it that dimension, how it comes off of the page and it appears that that red portion is sunk into the tire. It's only going to get better the more contrast that we add. I know dark colors can be kind of scary, but just try to, like if you would only go to a C7, try to go to a C9. Try to like challenge yourself to put in that contrast because I think you'll be much happier with your coloring. Don't be too heavy-handed with it, but give it a try. Just add a little bit here and there. So once I'm done adding all of the shading in, I'm going to work, back out to my lightest color, and I'm leaving those highlights, which are going to be the C3, and then I'll go over the whole thing once more with the C3 just to blend everything in. I was really happy with the way that they came out. I felt like they looked black. I felt like they looked dimensional, even though we colored them with grays. I wanted the background to have a little something to it. I wasn't really sure where I was going with this card, I'm not going to lie. I thought it was just a super cute idea to have all of these little toys. And I colored the wheels for the little wooden doggy. I didn't show you that either because I just literally colored it in and added like a half moon circle on the left-hand side. That was it. So I outlined the whole thing in a darker BG, and then I went back over it with a BG11. I ended up going over it one last time with a BG0000 just to blend it all out. And all of the supplies will be listed on my blog as well as in the YouTube description if you're watching there. I have colored all of the other pieces. I didn't add any new colors in, but I colored them all. I fussy cut them out. I went around the edges with a tuxedo black memento marker, and then I'm going to get ready to glue them. I wanted to do my sentiment first because anytime you're popping things up, you can break the contact between your paper and your block because of that different level, because of that different height. So here, I told you my desk is a mess. I just grabbed a random Post-it note to mask off the littler Christmas that went with that sentiment so that I could use the bigger one. I just felt that it fit the card better. Here I'm going to pop up all of these little pieces parts to, really give it some dimension. And I'm using just Scotch foam tape to go ahead and do that. I popped up the wagon, the dog, both of the bear's feet and his arm, and then the little girl's shoes. In order to do that, because they're half in the wagon, or the image looks like it's half in the wagon, half out the wagon, what I did was I only added foam tape to the areas that were going to be touching the actual card. Anything that was touching the wagon, I just used regular adhesive for, so that way everything stayed the same level. This is just, something you can do to like add a little something to your card, and I had just felt like I was in a rut and I wanted something different. So yeah, I use Tombow Metal Multi Glue. That works best for me. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room because it doesn't dry right away. And then if you try to use it after it dries, it's still repositionable, which I love. So this is like my go-to glue for everything. And then I'm going to put those down. I'm going to add her little feet. So like her little feet are dangling over the edge. And then I wanted to give them some ground. I kind of felt like they were floating around. And so I'm just using those same gray markers, the C3, C5, C7, just to give them a little bit of something to stand on. And to do that, I'm just using streaks of color, basically. I'm just using the flicking motion and the tip of my marker to just kind of draw a straight line out from underneath them and blend that all together. Ground doesn't, like giving something ground just gives it an anchor. It doesn't have to be something fantastic. This gray floor certainly isn't, but it's something that just really attaches them, really anchors them down, and it makes the card look better for it. After this was all said and done, I'm adding clear wink of Stella, but after it was all said and done, I felt like it still looked a little plain, so this was like 2 days later after I was looking at the card. I did go back in and add rhinestones. I added some clear rhinestones around the sentiment, and I added some red ones to make more ornaments because it just felt a little plain to me. So keep that in mind. Like, you don't always have to just, if you don't love it at the end of it, there's still time to kind of play around and see if you can get it where you want it. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I will catch you on the next one. Bye.